Okay. So the question for the podcast is, we have a part-time employee who has been with the city for a couple of years. The employee told her supervisor she could not move a heavy rolling bookshelf, which is part of the closing process at the library due to having a hernia. HR met with the employee to get more information and found out that this condition was diagnosed a year ago and has been an issue for quite some time, with the employee avoiding this task or asking someone else to do it. The employee was advised that HR needed documentation from her physician indicating this restriction was needed. HR sent her home with instructions to return with a detailed doctor note, at which time we would have reviewed with her. The employee then called HR later that day stating that they stopped at the doctor's office to get a note. The doctor she had been seeing is no longer with the practice, and the office would not provide a note without the employee being seen again, but would have to be referred to a surgeon. The employee is on state of Arizona insurance and with the start of the new year pending a new PCP. Long story short, the employee is unable to produce documentation that supports this condition or restricts her ability to push or move a rolling book cart that could weigh up to 200 pounds. This is listed as an essential duty of the job description. The employee also states that she cannot afford to miss even one day of work. How should we approach this?
So we've got a bunch of different questions going on there, but we start with somehow this employee has self-accommodated, and we clarified with this particular client that the supervisor was not aware she was self-accommodating. They started working with us as a member and trained their supervisors, and then the supervisor was aware or started noticing at that time that there was an accommodation occurring without their authorization, so they informed HR. Sent the HR the documentation with the certificate, giving her 2 weeks. She contacted before the 2 weeks were over, letting her know she couldn't provide the certificate. So we already know we've got an employee who's been there for a couple years, by the way, and she's a part-time employee. And this is the first time HR is really aware that there's a need for an accommodation. She's also indicating that if she moves that, she could be impacted and hurt at work. Then we talked to the supervisor, and the supervisor said, you know what? This isn't a problem. We've got plenty of people to help move that shelf. She doesn't need to move that shelf at the end of the day. We can get that done. So we started with, well, wait a minute. Is this an essential function? Is this like emptying the garbage at the end of the day and somebody on the shift can take care of it? We just need to make sure it gets emptied? Or is there only one person can do it, and if they're not there, it's not getting done, and it has to be done by the end of the day? We discovered that it needs to be done at the end of the day, but there's several people who could take care of it. So they're going to start by looking at whether it's really an essential function at this point in that particular department with that particular requirement. Now, what they've discovered is that job title actually doesn't always require that. So on a different shift during the day, they move the shelves around, but they can mitigate how many books are on them to lower the weight. And she's been doing that, actually. So that means she's been self-accommodating during the day and not having any trouble getting her job done. It's just that last evening thing. So the summary of the challenge was, first of all, is this really an essential function? Let's make sure we decide on that before we take down the axe. And then we determine, well, wait a minute, even if it is for that job, are there other shifts she could take as an option, not as an accommodation under ADA, but as a good faith effort to help her because she's saying she can't get the medical certificate. But we're going to have a discussion with her when she comes in next week and explain to her that we are not able, under any circumstances, unless it's a visible disability, or we've got documentation already that objectively confirms how her disability impacts her ability to do her job. We can't just jump into an accommodation, and we certainly do not allow informal accommodations to just occur because somebody wants them to. So the employee's own challenge with getting the medical certificate is the employee's own challenge. We are not responsible for it. The other piece to that is if we are visually seeing an employee being impacted at work and we think there's a safety issue, or they are self-reporting there's a safety issue, you could certainly have a physical ability assessment policy or a functional capacity evaluation assessment policy that you step into and require your employees to then engage in if you observed and they're denying they have a problem. But if the employee is self-reporting, we are typically not going to use a functional physical ability assessment requirement to avoid them having to go to their own medical provider to get us the certification that we are expecting to confirm how their disability impacts their ability to perform functions of the job, so we can then engage in the interactive process and determine whether we can accommodate that required restriction or whether it's an undue hardship. Now, let's take this discussion a little step further. If this employee is able to get us a certificate, and I think if we explain it to them slowly and carefully enough so they understand they could lose their job unless they want to take a shift that doesn't require that function, we would then be able to look at, well, can we accommodate you? Is it an undue hardship? And we've already been determined by the supervisor that said, well, no, she's been doing it for 6 months and we're not having any trouble. And the other employees aren't complaining. So it's not an undue hardship. It'd be pretty hard to show it's an undue hardship now. So then if she provides the medical certificate, we'll actually be able to accommodate her, because at this time, it's not an undue hardship to have the other gal on the shift to push that bigger, heavier shelf that has all the books that need to be put away at the end of the day. But you know what? It could be in the future, 3 months from now or 6 months from now, if the shift people change and it becomes a problem for somebody else, it may be an undue hardship. So we take these things as they come. We get the information from the employee in an objective manner. We speak to the supervisor, including why the job needs to require this and is there flexibility. And then we're making an educated, thoughtful decision by job description, not by employee. So the job description is valid first, and then we've got a medical certificate. And now we're doing a good faith undue hardship analysis to see whether we can really accommodate. And if we couldn't, then the next question would be, there's another shift that's available, if it's open, or it might be available in the future, that then would be able to accommodate you because you're actually not required to move that big shelf. So really good question. So thanks everybody for your attention, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Thanks, Maddie.